Hi, everybody. My name is Masashi. I hope you enjoyed our opening night presentation of Coming Home Again. I am so thrilled to have our director here with us tonight. Before I bring him to the screen, I just want to let you all know that you all can ask him questions. So there is a question box underneath the player. Please ask your questions, and in a few minutes, we'll start to include audience questions. So I want to welcome now the director of Coming Home Again, Director Wayne Wang. Welcome.
Thank you. I thank everyone for coming to see this film or joining in on their computer to see this film. So
well, thank you. I mean, normally we would be in a theater together, kind of all connected. I am always fascinated to think about everyone watching from their own couches, their own living rooms, and what they're eating, what they're hopefully eating something good as stuff that you would have seen in this movie. Wayne, can you talk
about wearing pants or not? No, I'm kidding.
That can be something we ask our audiences in the question box. So let's start at the beginning, Wayne. Can you talk about this film and why this is a film that you wanted to make?
Well, I actually worked with Chang-Rae Lee back in the early 2000s on another book of his called A Gesture Life, and I know him very well. And then 2 summers ago, Cam came to me and asked me if I would do a VR film, actually a VR remake of Chan is Missing. But we got a hold of a VR camera, and I just couldn't figure out a way to use it. I mean, you know, I'm seeing the back of my head all the time. So, and at that time, Don also told me that his grandmother had passed away, and the apartment that she lived in for many years is empty, and we can film in it. So I said, well, why don't we take the VR idea and just make a good film in this apartment, which has a lot of history, a lot of spirit of the grandmother and whatnot. So, and I thought of Chang-Rae Lee's short story, Coming Home Again, which was published '95, and we adapted it and started filming.
That's great, yeah. And as you mentioned, it was a short story. How did you take that story and make it into a feature film?
Well, I basically simplified it a little bit more in that I made it all happen in one day. And that's the New Year's Eve day where the Chang-Rae Lee character prepares a Korean New Year's Eve dinner for her family, exactly the way that the mother used to cook it. The mother is sick, so she can't do very much. And then throughout the day, as he prepares the meal, he kind of thinks back on a lot of memories and a lot of flashbacks about their relationship.
And yeah. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. I'll keep going. Oh, no, I was just going to go. I mean, definitely with the story, you know, I know you shot all of this pre-pandemic, but there is a really interesting, now that we're kind of in these times, there is something that I think resonates with that, right? With this story of these characters who are forced almost together in a space together, whether it's because of health or for other reasons. And so I have a question about the tone of the film. I think it's a really beautifully kind of made tone. Can you talk about how you created that sense and that feeling that you wanted in this film?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you were beginning to kind of say that it's very similar to, let's say, a lot of people taking care of their sick parents or whatnot during this pandemic. It's very similar. Actually, if I took out one voiceover in the beginning about her mother having stomach cancer, it could very well be coronavirus. The tone was mostly created by just taking my time. You know, during the days when I was working with a lot of Hollywood studio films, I remember the producers would always come by at some point and say, you know, there are these moments where the characters finish talking and they're not doing anything. Could you take those out? So what happens is that the film doesn't breathe. and it's like a car just pushing it, and pushing it. So in this film, we kind of really wanted to take our time to breathe, to look at things a little slowly, and appreciate what's there. And that's, to me, is also the important theme of the movie, is that, you know, our life is so transient, particularly during this whole pandemic period. It kind of forces us to deal with that even more. I know I go to Japan a lot, and the cherry blossom is a classic example. You know, it comes once a year, it's beautiful, and then it leaves and it goes away, and you have to accept it. And that's kind of what I was trying to do, and that's the tone that we kept ourselves, you know, very involved with.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think, you know, some of the key people that carried this tone were your kind of leads, Justin Chong and Jackie Chong. I wonder if you can talk about working with both of them.
Well, they were both super professional and super good actors. And I think we took a very little time talking about their characters. And once we did, they just got it. You know, both of them really, really, you know, especially somebody like Justin, who sort of digs in pretty deep. Actually, more of the time during rehearsal, they spent 2 weeks at Venue learning how to cook from Corey Lee. So in an interesting way, the rehearsal was all about, you know, Justin and Jackie learning how to cook, especially making kalbi.
Yeah, and I mean, food is definitely such an important part of the film. So you just talked about Justin training with Corey Lee. Can you talk about working with Corey and maybe the thought process? I know with the set design to the trainings, you really wanted to make sure that that kind of Korean family kind of authenticity was there. So can you talk about working with Corey?
Yeah, I brought Corey to the apartment, and he took one look at the kitchen and he said, "This kitchen is all wrong. This kitchen is so Chinese. The from the cookware to the sauces to, you know, the kinds of vegetable there, or all the wares that you use for serving dinner and whatnot." So he spent also a lot of time during the days when he was teaching Justin and Jackie how to cook during the day. At night, he would go into that apartment and rearrange everything or bring in things. So, you know, the whole look of the kitchen was changed to something that was more generically Korean, but very specific at the same time. The one thing that he said, actually, you know, when he read the script, he was thinking of something maybe very flashy and very glossy and you know, like really fancy food. But that, as soon as he saw the kitchen, he said, no, it has to be a very homey meal. So in that sense, I really like the authenticity of the New Year's Eve dinner not being too overblown, but it's like really down home food. And the metaphor that's really important to me is the kalbi, in that the bone is always attached to the flesh. And I mean, I'm sure there's a Korean saying too, or Japanese saying, but in the Chinese, you know, there's a saying that the bone and the flesh is the connection to the relationship.
Yeah, and you know, from the very first shot, I think food is so important. And I think it's interesting that you said, as far as your actors and the time for them to kind of develop their characters, that the training of the food was kind of key to that. And you know, watching the film, you clearly see this connection that they have and how food relates to it. So I think it's really powerful that that food element seems so strong between them in this film. Would you, you know, I mean, curious, you know, when you see this kind of food in films, you think, is this like a foodie film, or is food kind of one of those symbolic things in this film? Like when you're approaching it, how did you think of yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was approaching it more as symbolic, but also at the same time trying to make it a very clear, authentic process of the preparation, the cutting, the cooking, and the eating of the food. I think I wanted that all to be very, very true to life that way, and accurate, and then using that as a way to express also the relationship in the family. I think it's really important that the son learns to cook everything from the mother, and the mother, hands on basically all the little secrets about the recipe. Like she says, you have to put ground up pear in that kalbi sauce because the pear sauce makes it sweet. And those are the little secrets that he has to learn, and he has to learn how to do to inherit, basically the ritual of what the mother does for so many years.
And speaking of the mother and Jackie's wonderful performance, I know you premiered the film at TIFF, and then it played at Busan International Film Fest, and there's an interesting story with Jackie. Do you want to share that?
Well, Jackie, I think, was something like 7 or 8 months pregnant after TIFF. She was pretty ready to give the baby, to get the baby out already. And then Busan came along, and Busan said, we really want Jackie to come. We want Justin to come. And they both actually initially agreed. And then something happened. Justin got really busy. So Jackie said, oh, I'll go. And then she went, and then she had her baby in Busan, which is kind of like a nice symbol. I think it is. It's a symbol of good blessings. And but the part that was kind of difficult, she brought her husband and her son, who was, I think, 4 years old at the time, and they all lived in Korea or lived in Busan and Seoul for about maybe 2 to 3 months. And I think the baby is really the coming home again, blessing.
We do actually have a good amount of questions from our audiences. So if you all have questions, this is the time. You can ask those in that box. I'm going to start to go through some of those now. So I have a question from Chuck. Chuck asks, what were the implications of having the story of the changing venue of this film in San Francisco?
Say that again.
So San Francisco is the space, right? Is the home for this story. Is that because that's where the story takes place, or do you feel like there's anything more to having this film take place in San Francisco?
Well, it was easy because, again, like I said, Don's grandmother's apartment was left open after she passed away, and I felt that the apartment was full of the spirit of his family and the grandmother's family, and I really wanted to film there. Besides, it's only 3 blocks from my home, so I could walk to the set. So that's why we chose it. No, I haven't actually really shot anything since the Joy Luck Club in San Francisco, and I really wanted to, without going outside, without having really fancy shots, to establish San Francisco very quickly and very succinctly. And that's what we did. And little things like the back stairs of these older apartments. So those are really, really close to me because I lived in a building just like that.
It's great. Yeah. And thank you, as someone who lives in San Francisco. I think it easily looks like San Francisco without using the kind of traditional landmarks. Lauren asks, why did you decide to have no musical score in the film until the very last scene?
The which score?
Having a music in the film until the end. Yeah,
well, I didn't want to use any music for the film. I wanted you to listen to the ambient sounds. When I did use music, there were a couple of times it was actually either coming from the TV or the mother turning on a piece of music to kind of, get back at the father, or, Justin's character turns on a kind of Asian rap song just to get his anger and frustration out. So, but other than that, there's no music used. So I only use the music at the very end because to me, that epilogue sequence where he's driving and he sees the parents and remembers the parents is kind of like a dream sequence. And that's the only point that I wanted to use some music. Actually, a little kid saw the movie and he says, "You know what's really missing from the movie is music."
A follow-up to that question, Vicky asks, the ending music is so beautiful. What is the title of it?
Ooh, it's a Korean, it's a very popular Korean song. It's actually the same song that the mother plays. It's a love song. I have to look it up again. It's hard for me to remember the specific name, but it's a Korean song that's replayed very classically on the piano at the end of the movie. And I remember first hearing that song because it was so popular all over Asia. I was filming Chinese Box in Hong Kong in the middle of the night, and we were really, really cold. So the DP and I walked into a 7-Eleven, bought some vodka, and we were sitting there drinking vodka, and that music was playing, and it really made a deep impression with me.
Jonathan asks, can you talk or share more about how you designed the New Year's Eve dinner scene?
Yeah, I think the lighting was very much designed by Rich Wong, who worked very closely with me. I wanted everything to be pretty dark and not overlit. I mean, these days a lot of films are just really overlit. So we kept it pretty dark, but still very warm. And we made it very simple because there were only 4 people. But that's pretty much kind of the design, you know. The room is a lot of dark wood, so it kind of played into the tone visually of it. The setup was somewhat improvised, that scene, because the short story, it was kind of more, everything just happened pretty nicely. But in this case, you know, all the actors and myself all felt that it needs a little more drama. You need to feel the pain of it more. So, you know, we had Jackie eat the kalbi and she couldn't swallow it and she throws it up. And from there, everything kind of goes downhill, so to speak. I really like the scene where Justin is sitting there and he's got the rib in his hands and he just basically rips the flesh off the bone. It's a very powerful moment for me.
Yeah. Angela asks a question about Chan Rui Lee. What was Chan Rui Lee's role in the creation of this film, and what was his experience like to relive this part of his life 20 years later? Were there any parts that were taken out of the film were there any parts in the original story that maybe wasn't in the film?
I think most of it is in the film. Like I said, we changed the ending. So once the dinner started happening, a lot of changes were made. But otherwise, the rest of it is pretty close to the original story. He helped me write all the dialogue scenes. Actually, there weren't that many dialogue scenes. Especially in the beginning, there were only 6 or 7 dialogue scenes, and they came pretty much directly from the short story. And then we realized, well, that we needed more dialogue scenes to balance off what I call the process scenes, where, you know, the actors are just doing something like preparing the meal or you know, just kind of sitting there and there's silence. So, you know, he helped me with a lot of the dialogue. And then we also added a few things which are his ideas. Like, for example, the Korean religious scene was something that he said, you know, they came quite often when his mother was sick. So he remembered those scenes, even though weren't in the short story, so we added scenes like that.
Great. I should mention that most of these questions start with "I love the film." I've just been cutting that out for time, but just so you know, a lot of people are saying really.
That, you know? No.
We could be here all night. I can go through them all. There is one. It's a little bit of a longer question, but in order to ask it, I think I need to say all of it. But Spring says, "Thank you so much for creating such a very beautiful film. Especially, it resonates with me a lot when you mentioned giving breathing room in the film. The atmosphere that you created around the film was so gentle and tender, and I really appreciate that. It kind of reminds me of my favorite Korean filmmaker, Lee Kangdong. Some moments in the film really remind me of some of the scenes in his film called Poetry. Do you have any Korean American filmmakers that you would want to introduce to a US audience?"
I don't know the Korean directors that well. Most of the Korean films I like are really violent. There are, you know, I think the Lee Chang-dong was the one that I think has a better tone and maybe is more similar to this film. But mostly I'm more influenced by the Japanese directors. And, you know, I've talked about Ozu a lot, but Ozu is a big influence. And also in this case, I really went back to the days when I was still in film school. I saw a film by Chantal Ackerman called Jean Dillman. And if you think my film is slow, that film is like 10 times slower than mine. But I really, really enjoyed it because it took its time, you know, to establish a ritual of a housewife and what she does every day. And it's beautifully done, and it really establishes, again, a great tone. So I'm sorry I don't know any, you know, Korean directors at this point to recommend, but you know, there are a lot of great Japanese directors actually that has that tone.
Priyana asks, seems like there was a lot of focus on the protagonist, the mother, father, all their hands. Was there any thought while you were filming it of the symbolism of hands in this film?
That's a good question. I didn't think of their hands so much. I know the hands of Justin I saw a lot because we show so much of him cutting and preparing. I don't think we see, maybe the mother also, because she was also preparing things in the flashbacks. But I don't think you see very much the sister or the father, actually. I could be wrong.
I think we are starting to run out of time, and there's more questions. So I'm gonna, what is for this film? I mean, you've talked about it already a little bit, but what do you want people, what is the message of the film? What do you want people to take away from watching this film?
I think people, you know, and I'm getting to an age where I'm getting old, you know, and I have to accept my own death or own end. And I've had a good life, and I want to appreciate what I had gone through. But like I said, the transience of life. I mean, I can't go on forever, so I have to die sometime, and I have to accept that. And this is what the film is helping people deal with. So, you know, and especially with the pandemic going on, so many parents or friends or relatives have passed away. And I think it's a way to kind of, you know, respect and honor them, and then accept that, you know, this is life.
This film is having its theatrical very soon. Can you talk about the theatrical and how people can watch this film and recommend it to their friends and family?
Oh, yeah, I was surprised. I mean, normally it's really, you have to fight with so many other films to get into a theater. But the good thing these days with the pandemic is that we got into like 50, 60 theaters around the country, which is amazing for this kind of a film.
That's great.
we don't really have a film in San Francisco, but we have it all around San Francisco. So if you want to recommend it to friends, you can actually go see it in a theater, probably pretty nearby. And it's nice to see it on the big screen because the shot stays on for so long. You can really kind of, your eyes wander and you can find things. You know, like for example, there are a lot of, you know, pictures of 3 generations of kids of the grandmother who lived in that house. So I know they're not Korean, but they look close enough. But you can kind of see those things more clearly. So I encourage you to see it on a big screen.
Yeah, and it's coming out starting next week, the end of next week. So very soon. So definitely for everyone who watched it, you are, you know, some of the first people to see it. Definitely, please spread the word. Let people know how you felt about the film. We are out of time. So Wayne, I want to thank you so much for being our opening night film, for making this really wonderful film. I've seen this film a good amount of times because of Cam's connection to it. And it is the type of film I can actually watch many times because I just feel like I could sit with these characters and kind of live with them. So I want to thank you. I want to thank our audiences for watching tonight. We still have 2 more days of our festival ahead. So I hope to see you all at a future program. So have a great night, and I'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.